Welcome to Conversations with Educators, where we bring educators from across the country to talk about topics like college and career readiness, graduation tracking, teacher growth, assessment coordination, and more. Let's get started.
Well, it looks like quite a few people are still logging in, but we want to be respectful of your time. So we're going to go ahead and get started. This session will be recorded and we'll be sending that out too. So I'm really excited. I'm Kim Tunnell with Education Advanced, and thank you for joining us, carving out some time. We know how busy you are for this Conversations with Educators today. Today's topic is on stopping the guesswork for PD and how to use your rubric to target support. So we're going to have introductions of our key speakers today, and then we're going to go through some questions and share some best practice and strategies with you. And then please drop any questions that you have into our Q&A section here on the webinar. Down at the bottom, you'll find a button there, and we'll save some time at the end. So it's my honor to introduce our guest today, Matt Perini from Thoughtful Classroom and Rick Fisher from the state of Kentucky, a former educator and also part of Thoughtful Classroom. So Matt, introduce yourself and give a little bit of background, and then Rick will let you do the same, and then we'll get started.
Thank you, Kim. I am the Director of Content Development for Thoughtful Classroom and Silver Strong and Associates. And the best part of my work is I get to work with educators all the time and to really listen and learn and try and use what we learn from our work in schools to develop solutions. That's tools, strategies, products, resources, books. And I'm really honored by all I've learned from all of that listening over many years.
Okay. We're so glad to have you here, Matt. And Rick, what about you?
Well, good afternoon, everyone. And boy, I'm so happy to be here with you this afternoon. I currently am trainer, coach, mentor as part of the Thoughtful Classroom, but I started out as a science teacher. I've been a school principal, assistant superintendent, so I played a lot of roles over my 35 years in the business of education. And I've also, like Matt, love working with, I'm actually in a school today, working with groups of high school teachers. So I feel right at home.
That's awesome. And thank you for joining us. Rick, I'll go ahead and start with you. Our first question is, how do you use teacher observation and the data from teacher observations to guide professional development?
Well, thinking back to my experiences as a school principal, as a district leader of learning, one of the things I always focused on was, what I call the relentlessly pursuing improvement. So it's how do we get better at teaching? How do we get better at learning? How do I get better at leading every year? But when we think about instruction, what's the area that gives us the biggest bang for our time, right? And that's tier one instruction. And so thinking about the connections between teacher observation structures and professional development, and how do they support tier one instruction? And I think there's really three moves that I've found that's very helpful in using both of these concepts to support instruction. And they come in the way of some shifts. I think there's three shifts that we can make. The first shift is shifting the role of the PLC from a session that focuses on problems to a session that focuses on increasing professional learning. The second shift would be shifting the role of the teacher observations from just an evaluation of instruction to a vehicle to improve instruction. And the third shift I see these things in connection with is that we change the role of the teacher evaluation framework from a checklist of vague behaviors, um, and really change that to a concrete guide for improvement. Just to give you an example of the third one, it's something we've been working on here in Kentucky this past year, and we call it exemplary teaching. And in Kentucky, like every state, you have a teacher evaluation, a teacher framework, a teacher evaluation system. And one of the things that I found to be very helpful for teachers is to look at the criteria. In Kentucky, we call it accomplished and exemplary. And so ask ourselves, what's the difference between accomplished and exemplary? And really kind of break that down into its essence. So clear away the clutter and say, what does it mean to teach a lesson at the accomplished level? What does it mean to level up to the exemplary level? And so breaking those down, one really helps teachers think about, how do I develop a lesson for my observation, a lesson for any other day that helps me level up to the highest level. And so breaking that down has been very helpful for teachers to see that connection between, oh, that's not as scary as I once thought it was, because exemplary feels a whole lot like a stuff I really am not sure how to do. And so by working with teachers on, here's the difference, and then the most important part is, how do I do it? And so the question I ask myself is, okay, if this is the difference, if this is what you need to do to level up from accomplished teaching to the highest level, exemplary, is there a tool or strategy that would help a teacher apply that in a simple design, a easy to use fashion? And as it turns out, we have tons of great tools that connect to that framework. And so I spent a lot of time working in the PLCs, helping teachers think about what tools would help you level up your lesson from accomplished to exemplary, and really start to get kids involved in more of the thinking, the doing, making meaning in their own minds. These are the critical things that really help us improve tier one instruction, because we're getting the kids to be doing more of the thinking and us doing less of the talking. And so I think
That's
that's a connection that comes to my mind as to how um, the observation structures support and work together with professional development.
Yeah, and I
I
think you bring up a really good point on that common language, and then kind of the calibration of what does it look like to be accomplished? What does it look like to be exemplary? Matt, do you want to add anything?
yeah, I want to. I mean,
Yeah,
I love the shifts Rick laid out, and
yeah.
I think a couple things there that I want to talk about a little bit. So um, it's that third one, that exemplary teaching move. One of the things that sometimes gets in the way of schools using their observation process well is what we call rubricitis. Like, there's a lot of language and it's dense, and there's indicators and behaviors, but what Rick and the schools he's working have done have really found a golden thread through the whole thing that really narrows the focus and really helps us focus on, this is what we need to do to be our best in the classroom. And I think that's a really powerful move. The I think also what Rick laid out is kind of like, these are the things that these are the conditions that successful schools create so that observation can guide professional development. And so it's really a wonderful sort of macro answer to that question. I think they're at the micro level in terms of what an observer really needs to be able to do. I think one of the things that sometimes gets in the way is the challenge of feedback. I've got lots of teachers, different levels. I may not have the same instructional chops as an observer as the teachers that I'm observing. All of that stuff can get in the way. And so the question of what good feedback looks like that's actionable to a teacher, I think, can be something that is really critical to guide professional development. It's some researchers say it's the most important thing. And
Oh,
one of the things that gets in the way is it's how do you do it in a way that's simple, that's clear, and that the teacher can act on. And so one of the things we like to talk about and that we work with schools is how do you make your feedback process really work? And we've developed something called the 4 Ps, and schools really respond positively to this. You don't have to write a book, you don't have to write a novel. Less is more. All you need to do is the first P is you need to provide evidence. It's not just check, 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 but you have to discuss what you saw in an objective way, right? It can't be subjective, and that's important. The second is praise. And it can't just be like gushy praise, great lesson. It has to do two things to be effective praise. It has to clearly point out what the teacher did. You use the what if question to get kids to think creatively. And it has to tell you what the impact was. I saw students get more engaged and I saw lots of great ideas being generated in the student group. So you're making that praise really work for teacher. So you reinforce it. The third is pose. Just one good posing question. Tell me a
Yes.
little bit about what you noticed about students' reactions to the kinds of questions you asked, or what did you expect and was it what you saw? Getting teachers to start to pose on the intentionality of their decisions, and one good question can make a big difference. And the fourth P is propose. How do you give teachers not vague recommendations about how to improve, but concrete tools and strategies that they can really use to make a difference in the classroom tied to what you saw? And I know we're going to have some other questions, and I want to talk about those tools and strategies in a different part. So, but I think those 4 Ps really help solve the challenge of direct feedback to teachers.
Yeah, and it gives a great framework to further that thinking, but then yet give autonomy to the teachers to be part of that process too, right? So it's not just one way communication, it's that collaboration and dialogue. So
Absolutely.
um, perfect. Okay. Well, our second question for you both is what are some practical ways to support teachers with that just in time professional development? And I know you've both touched on that a little bit. Matt, why don't you go ahead and start us off and share some of those practical ideas?
Absolutely. And I think this is the thing that makes the biggest difference. And I think this is one of the things that sometimes schools have a hard time with, to move from observation and numbers to real concrete practical ways that actually make a difference in the classroom. And so um, this is really what we've been doing at the Thoughtful Classroom now for 50 years. And we really put our energy and our time in the development and refinement of instructional tools and strategies. There's a ton of research out there. There's, everything that teach all these challenges that teachers have. How do you really work with educators to develop simple, practical, and research-based techniques that make a difference? And so it's having a practical way as an observer and having a practical way as a teacher to address a challenge I might notice in the classroom. And let me give you a couple examples of that. So, as an observer, I might walk into a classroom and I might see the teacher asking a lot of questions. But as I'm sitting there for 12 or 13 minutes, I notice that they're almost all of one type. They're almost all basic factual recall questions. Did you understand what I said, and can we move on? And we know that questioning, the research is it's one of the greatest ways to increase engagement in the classroom.
Yes.
But you've got to diversify your questioning practices. You've got to use questions that get kids to scratch their heads and say, oh, I hadn't thought about that. You've got to use questions that can release an inner lawyer in students. So they want to debate and take positions. You can use questions to get students to think creatively about the content. Questioning has that power. Now, it's one thing to make a vague recommendation, like I think you should diversify your questioning practices, which doesn't really help a teacher all that much. But if
Mhm.
I can say, here's a tool, it's called questioning in style. It's a really simple technique. And what it does is it really is a reminder that every time you are building a lesson or a unit or designing how to integrate questions that focus on recall, no one's saying recall is not important, but also on reasoning and thinking, and also on imagination and speculation, and also on connecting to your own life and how you help students see the social value in their learning. And here's a bunch of stems that you can use with any content to quickly design those questions because it has to be practical or teachers can't do it. And so giving teacher practical tools like questioning and style, or another one I love, window notes. I'm a teacher. I notice I have to get kids more actively engaged when I'm doing classroom presentations. And those old-fashioned note-making techniques, I see a lot of bored students, I see a lot of hands just scribbling. Window notes. It's a simple technique. Asking students, divide your paper into 4 panes, make a window, and keep track as we learn about facts or details that you hear you think are important, questions that you have, ideas or connections to other content, and how you're feeling. And making sure that students understand that notes are a record of their own learning and a way to engage with content and ask questions. It opens up huge windows in the dynamic between the way kids think about notes and the way the teacher and students interact in learning and processing content. But to be able to hand that tool to a teacher and say, this will make a difference, as opposed to, I noticed some bored students and I noticed note making that really wasn't doing anything in the classroom. Now you've got a responsibility to say, what do you do about it? Here's a tool. And we're really excited about the fact that we are launching with Education Advanced something called the 21. And it really is designed to answer this exact question. We worked to identify 21 of the best tools and strategies for classroom use that have the strongest degree of connection with all the themes of teacher observation. And every teacher observation rubric, they all have their pluses, they all have their minuses, but they also have a lot in common. You're always going to see stuff about classroom management. You're always going to see stuff about student engagement and questioning and positive social environment and collaborative learning. And so, what are the tools and strategies that line up with those themes? And now, as an observer, I can make a direct recommendation. Like I just mentioned, I noticed a lot of factual recall questions. Let me look up questioning, or let me look up that element on my rubric that's about questioning, and it's going to recommend questioning and style. And now I can recommend that to the teacher, and now we can have a conversation about instruction and a tool and strategy and tied directly to observation. And we're really excited about that, about the launch of the 21, which I think is next week. Is it not, Kim?
Yes, it is next week. Yeah. Yeah, I think it goes to the sense of urgency of our administrators in, you talked about those tools and having effective tools. I always said my job as an administrator and supporting my teachers was to have a tool belt and to know when to pull out the right tool to help them. And if you think about our teaching core today, there are many that are coming from non-education backgrounds, right? They're alternatively certified. And so the need for those tools and access for administrators to effective tools to help support them is paramount. And I think you touched on it. Rick, did you want to add anything else to how to incorporate practical ideas?
Yeah, your question mentioned just in time, just in
Yes.
time PD, and it got me to thinking about my experiences just here at the high school this morning. And we were talking with the groups of teachers as they came through during their PLC time. And so I'm just asking them, how's it going? What's your struggles? And a common theme today, we're really having trouble getting kids to provide details, to be able to give evidence to things and really explain what they're talking about. And so, we just can't seem to get them engaged in that. And so I shared with them a tool. We call it forced choice. It's uses controversy, and who doesn't love a little controversy, right? It's human nature. Which the news outlets, I guess, make of a living off of controversy, and so it's a human nature kind of a thing. And the teachers are like, that's perfect. This is exactly what we needed right now to really help spur these things on. So a simple tool that really, once we kind of went through it and experienced it a little bit, looked at some things, could literally go back this afternoon and use it to start making a change in the kinds of problems of practice that they were just talking about when we started. And so I think it just made me think of just my experiences this morning
Yeah,
of having the right tool to solve the right problem of practice.
yeah, that's great.
That is great.
I know we have some district leaders on this webinar in addition to campus administrators. And if I put on that district leadership hat when I supervise principals, I felt like one of my roles was to equip them with tools and with resources so that they could share with teachers. What advice do you have for district leadership on promoting that growth and using observations and the rubric to gauge that growth and then to plan for professional development, because you've got individual professional development, campus professional development, and then district professional development, right? So there's three different buckets there. What are some advice that you have or strategies for that?
Well, I'll start on that one. Um, one of the things that we like to think about from even a school perspective, but certainly also from a district perspective, and we're thinking about what's going on. We need to know what's going on in the classrooms across the district, and that usually we all have some focus, right? We're working on something, but four questions I think help sort of guide the thinking around observations and how those things help plan for PD is kind of thinking about it this way. The first one is, something like, what do we know? What do we know about good instruction? For example, Matt was talking about questioning, right? We know that asking a variety of questions that make kids go, I got to think about that a minute before I can answer it. So we know that good questioning is good teaching. And so that's what we know. The next question we could ask ourselves is, what is so? What is so in our district? And so we can go out and seek to find what is so. What is our level of questioning going on in the school district or in the school? And once we figure out what is so, we can then figure out how can we improve it? How can we tackle that problem of practice? And then so we find a solution or solutions, apply those solutions, and then we come back and say, okay, so what did we see? What do we see now? We've tried this. This was a problem. We've entered into some type of tool or strategy to try to improve it. Now, what is the result? It makes me think of a couple of really great strategies that I think have served me well as a school and district administrator. And going back to my idea of shifts at the beginning of the session, one of the shifts I talked about was changing the role of teacher observations from not just being an evaluation of instruction, but a vehicle to improve instruction. And one of the moves that we can make as leaders is we call a learning walk. And a learning walk follows those four questions that I started talking about. What do we know? So we've got something that we want to focus on in our school. Like yesterday, I was working in an elementary school and they were wanting to focus on, they've been trying to work on their questions. So that was our focus. We're going to see what kinds of things teachers are doing with questions across the school. And so we set out with administrators and teachers. So this is the magic, right? So this is not just administrators walking around with a checklist on a clipboard, but we're going in with teachers and we're just collecting information around questions. What kind of questions are we asking? And how are kids responding? And are kids using those questions? And so, what is so? We were walking the school, spending 10 or 15 minutes in each class, finding out what is so. And then so we collect that information in a learning walk and then we reflect on it. So what did we see today? And then we take that information back to the whole staff and say, hey, here's what we saw. And then so how can we? So how can we improve this, work on the next level of thinking, whatever it happens to be. But boy, a learning walk, that process of pulling in teachers and leaders together, capturing what's happening in our school. I don't know if there's a better way to help build collective efficacy. And we know that,
Yeah.
that's maybe the best thing we can possibly do in schools is all of us working on that, what Harvey calls the we, right? We got to work on the we. Um,
Yeah.
Another structure that I think ties to one of the shifts I talk about is that role of the PLC. How do you change the PLC from a session that focuses on problems to one that focuses on solutions? And another structure, uh, um, we call it the learning club, is a way to build in professional learning during your PLCs. You still got to do PLCs and look at data and all
Yeah.
those things. And we're not saying that's wrong or bad. It's great. You should do it. But also, it could be a little bit more. And maybe it's also about learning some instructional practices. And so the learning club is a cycle of learning a new tool and strategy. Maybe it affects a current problem of practice like we had here in the school today. And teachers go out and try that tool and then they come back to the next learning club and they gather around in a group and they talk about what did we notice, how did this tool change the behavior, did it get what we were after, what changes might I make. And so boy, this happened at our school and it just changed our conversations, and it empowered us. It empowers teachers to say, hey, I can apply something to problems and actually improve them. And boy, that's that's liberating, I think, for
Yeah.
schools. And so learning clubs are a cycle. And you meet, you look at a new tool, you try it out, you come back, you talk about it, look at student work, add another
Yeah.
tool, rinse and repeat. Before you
Yeah.
know it, you've built capacity. Wow, so much in all of your staff, and you're really developing that professional learning. And all that's translating to tier one instruction. It translates to tier two, translates to tier three. But using that PLC process for the learning club, using the learning walks to see how it's going. I think those are really big structures that bring a district together around that common language, which Matt and you was talking about a little bit earlier. It really builds
Yeah.
that common language and builds a lot of synergy in a school
Yeah.
as well.
Yeah, definitely builds a lot. It creates a culture of learning. We all say that we want to have our campuses and our districts are, have a learning culture. Those two things that you just mentioned is what helps create that culture. So everybody, we're all rowing in the same direction, and
Yeah.
the goals are the same, and it's not punitive. It's not, it's a formative process. So that's really exciting. Matt, did you want to add anything else before we
Yeah,
jump to the
really
Q&A?
quickly. I know we're coming up against time, but really quickly, I just wanted to add to, man, I really enjoyed listening to Rick talk about, there are things schools do in some ways, but they're done in a way that really respects teachers and the growth process, and you can get that commitment as opposed to a compliance model. I think that's really at the heart of that. One other thing in terms of moving from observation to planning strategically for districts, for campuses, for schools, is using the tools of data management. And one of the things I love most about, there's a lot of things I love about the EA platform, but one of my favorite features is the heat map. It really just helps me see, there's all of this observation data, and the heat map shows me across everybody where we have collective strength and where we have collective areas that we need to grow. And to be able to have access to that in real time and to be able to build a plan that's really targeted around all the observations we're getting from different administrators, from different observers, from different buildings, that's really powerful. I mean, that's a ton of work synthesized on one screen to really help you make a strategic decision about where you're going to put your energy for future planning. And I think that heat map and other features like that really help with the data portion of that question. How do you
Yeah.
plan strategically?
Yeah, that's perfect. And that's why I think both of us are creating tools to help educators use data effectively, but also improve instruction so that we can increase student achievement. I mean, that's the whole goal, right? So, okay. So we now want to answer any questions that you have. If you want to just drop those in the Q&A down there at the bottom, we can get some answers. And you got a couple of great experts here, so feel free to drop something in about something specifically that you're working on in your district or your campus, or some ideas. Lots of great ideas have been shared already. So okay, so the heat map that Stephanie, the heat map that Matt is referring to is one of our reports that we have in our staff evaluation tool called Evaluation, that gives an overall view. It could be filtered by campus, but it shows based upon the rubric where everybody is scoring as far as their observation data or their walkthrough data or whatever. And it gives a heat map, and it's color coded, customized for districts and set up. So that's just one of the things that we offer in our software that help. You could do it, I guess, manually, or in a spreadsheet or some. As a former curriculum director, I would do spreadsheets based upon walkthrough data and observation data, but it was done manually and a lot of work there. So anyway, what other questions are out there that you have? Thank you, Stephanie, for
Yes, thank you.
jumping in. Yeah.
While we're waiting for if any other questions come in, I just want to, and Kim and I, this was planned on the back of the napkin like 2 years ago, and to see a project come to fruition like this is really exciting, because we know from our experience in working with lots of schools, and from your experience, and this is the exact place where the process doesn't, where the impasse is how do I empower teachers to take the leap, to make the step, to focus on questioning, or a classroom, or and the idea that now that they're like 12-minute, they're called tools and 12-minute tutorials that really focus on a particular challenge that is a common challenge across all the rubrics and all the evaluation models: questioning, classroom management, social emotional learning, engagement, etc. The things that we all know good teaching looks like. And then tools that I can just search by term or by my rubric. I can search by engagement, or I can search by 2B or whatever I'm looking for on my rubric. And I can instantly get some selections, make a choice. That's a powerful choice for the teacher. And now what happens to the conversation is it's not predicated on some vague recommendations. It's predicated on a technique that we both have as a common language, that we can now really further the conversation, and I can really work to advance every teacher's learning in a personalized way. And that's just, I can't tell you how excited I am about the 21, and I know schools are going to be really excited about it too when they see it.
Yeah, I agree, Matt. I think it's one of those things we get questions a lot from our current clients about: how do I help teachers grow? There's 50 million things on my plate. I've got multiple hats I'm wearing. We all know what that was like when we were in those seats. And so providing this tool and the access and mapped to whatever rubric that you're using gives you 21 very targeted, high quality, research based strategies. And so we're really excited to launch this next week, and very thankful for our partnership with Thoughtful Classroom, because whether you're a Thoughtful Classroom district or not, those tools are fantastic and stand this test of time. And like Matt mentioned earlier, have been around for 50 years. I remember being in the classroom and getting my first tools for classroom instruction, that I would pull out ideas on my own. So anyway, well, it looks like we don't have any other questions. So let me just thank you all for coming. And I want to share too, Thoughtful Classroom, please reach out to us. If you have any questions, there you can go to questions@thoughtfulclassroom.com. They have a plethora of very effective tools that are used. And then also I would be remiss if I did not share about Education Advanced. So we power the journey from the classroom to cap and gown, and evaluation is the tool that we've mainly focused on in today's conversation. And we hope that you have an enjoyable afternoon, and we thank you for participating and look forward to continued dialogue, and be on the lookout for the 21. It's coming next week. So anyway, thank you both, Matt and Rick, for your valuable contribution and strategies. There's definitely some great takeaways there for campus and district leaders.
Thank you so much, Kim. Thank you, everyone. We thank you for attending and taking time from your busy schedules.
Yep. Have a great day.
Thanks,
Bye-bye.
everyone.
Thanks for joining us. If you want to learn more about college and career readiness, graduation tracking, teacher growth, assessment coordination, be sure to subscribe to our newsletter. Until next time.